Let's get into our big story, and it is the Big Ten standing in the college football world. The latest AP poll out yesterday. Ohio State holding steady at number 2, got 18 first-place votes. Michigan still 4th. The top 6, in fact, all remained unchanged. Penn State back up to 13, and Illinois moves up a spot in the bye week. The Illini are number 17. Let's run through Saturday's action. Let's start with Penn State. We had a lot of questions about the Nittany Lions, frankly, coming out of that game with Michigan. They manhandled Minnesota. Again, it was a Minnesota team playing with a backup quarterback, so I do think it's fair to mention that. All that being said, though, slow start, but man, they look good down the stretch of that game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you watch the beginning of that game, you're concerned still,
yes.
Right? You're looking at these 3 and outs, you're looking at this interception from Sean Clifford, and you're still wondering, okay, maybe there still is this gap, and you start looking at the schedule and seeing Ohio State coming up next and all these things. But they really turned things around. You know, I think the defense was good. The offense got rolling. The tight end usage, I think, was really exciting and it clearly has been a focus for them. And then the running backs complemented the whole thing out. So I think ultimately you're happy with where it came out.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the tight ends. I have 3 names written down here: Strange, Warren, and Johnson. Those guys are really good players and truly an X factor now within this offense. And I don't think just because of what they can do in the pass game, but when I look at this Penn State offense and their ability to run the football, one of the things I always go back to is their formation versatility and the fact that they can manipulate different coverages. So in the run game, they can get those big tight ends on smaller guys. They need to continue to do that. But the defense, too. And this is a Minnesota team that we knew was going to come in running the football. You mentioned the backup quarterback, Rever. And Penn State did a great job of stopping them at the line of scrimmage. They gave up 3.4 yards per carry to Minnesota. That is a really good number, especially when you know Mo Ibrahim's back there. And just one broken tackle, and that guy is 88 and out the gate. So as I look at it, there's probably a question of which Penn State team are we going to get consistently, but when they're playing good football at their high end, this is a team that can really compete.
Well, and I think it was really important. We talked about this last week about how one loss can snowball into another.
And particularly their tendency to do it.
For them in the last 5 years specifically. So I thought that was really important to come out the way that they did, even when the game didn't start the way they wanted.
Right. I mean, you lose that game, which obviously there wasn't much jeopardy to them losing, but kind of to your point, then you got Ohio State, and then all of a sudden it's like, here we go again, right? I mean, I don't want to write off their chances of beating Ohio State, but it's going to be very challenging. So, no, I'm with you. I thought they responded really well. I mean, can we give Sean Clifford some love, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know there are a lot of people who are Penn State fans, not that they're anxious to show him the door, but they're so excited about Aller, and I get it. Like, I understand that. But Sean Clifford threw 4 touchdown passes. Minnesota had given up 4 all year. He responded from the early interception. Like, I just thought, and the early interception was bad.
It was awful.
Yeah, it was really bad.
It was it was a bad start.
Yes. No,
that's
bad.
what I think is really impressive.
Yeah.
Is this Sean Clifford's best performance at Penn State?
It was really good.
It's probably right up there. I mean, he was really good. And you could tell James Franklin after the game, like he's like, I love this guy.
Yes.
This has been my guy. He's defended him. He's pushed back on all that stuff that you were just saying about Drew Aller, which is definitely there with this fan base.
For sure.
And so then he gets to be validated. He gets to celebrate this with Clifford.
And I mean, it's like almost every other college campus, the backup quarterback's the most popular guy around, right? And so
no doubt.
Everybody wants to see him. I have been a Sean Clifford defender personally because the guy has grit and he's got toughness. And it seems like every time he gets punched, he comes back out swinging again. I think that's a really important quality for your starting quarterback. So you mentioned the production, throwing the football, the 4 touchdown passes is really important there. But also, I think the other guys kind of go as he goes. And he's been a great leader just for their mentality. He's a guy who has never quit. Even when he's been down, he's gotten back up. And especially after their performance against Michigan, to come back out there with that mentality as a quarterback is key.
Quick thoughts on the Gophers before we move on. Again, backup quarterback in Callie Manis, who showed some things. I mean, he's a prospect that they're excited about as well. He showed the ability to run the ball, definitely has a strong and live arm. But it just feels like they have lost all the momentum they had at the beginning of the year. 3 straight losses. They've scored 41 points in those 3 games.
I just don't know if any team would have been able to withstand the injuries that they have and keep that season on track. Yeah. I mean, that's where I am. I mean, obviously it's going to be disappointing, and I think people are going to be frustrated. And you're frustrated by that performance because you look at Penn State, what they did against Michigan, and think maybe that's a winnable game, right? Even with a backup quarterback. But again, you have key injuries to your best receiver, your best running back, and your best quarterback. I think that's what you got to chalk the season up to.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. And I keep going back to this. There's a game plan now for beating Minnesota defensively, and it's loading the box. And what that creates is isolation plays in the back end. They were 4 for 15 on passes over 5 yards. And with a young quarterback, it becomes difficult, but you got to hit those windows. The one thing that I will continue to go back to for Minnesota, you have a 6'7", 280-pound tight end. If you're getting one-on-one coverage, that's the guy you got to find.
And they did use him in this game.
And it was successful when they got to him.
Right.
I think it needs to become more of a focal point in this offense. And to be fair, Kirk Ciarrocca is a guy who believes that you can plug and play guys within the system and you just need to go through the progressions. I think in college football nowadays, you also need to have those go-to plays where you isolate your guy, got to have it. There needs to be more of that within this offense.
One other quick point was, coming into the season with the way they started, we kind of overlooked some of the offensive line, the plugging and playing there, right? That they needed to have new guys and they needed to get them up to speed. And it was fine against the non-conference and when people were healthy, and then we're starting to see that become more of a challenge as well.
Lost 179 career starts there.
A lot.
That is
a lot of starts.
Tough to bounce back from. They do have a much easier schedule coming up here. Rutgers, Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa. So I think they have a chance to maybe string some wins together. What do we make of Ohio State? So they scored 54 points, Joshua, which is the most that a Kirk Ferentz Iowa team has ever given up. They're well under 400 yards of offense. But still, defense locked down. Again, we know the problems Iowa's had offensively. The issue to me is they did not run the ball well. And so I think when we look at what went wrong with Ohio State, wrong being a relative term, last year, the issue was that when they played Michigan, the game they needed to run the ball, they were not able to do it. And this is a similar type defense, and they weren't able to do it. So are you concerned, or do you look at all the other stuff and say, man, they're still really good?
A lot of factors going into this one. I had to dive into that tape just so I could speak to why they hadn't been able to run the football. Iowa is a team that typically plays quarters coverage. And so what you get in quarters is 2 high safeties. A lot of people would say that's a favorable box, but really, people who believe in running quarters defense would tell you it's actually a 9-man box because you can get both of the safeties into the run fit. So that's a hard box to run into. There were actually a lot of situations, though, where Iowa decided they were going to get into a single high safety, which is an 8-man box count. You always have one free guy to make the tackle. And so Ohio State was really going against an unfavorable box count in a lot of those gotta-have-it run situations. And I think that's a part of it. This is where that becomes an issue. C.J. Stroud is not a runner of the football. So if you don't have that extra offensive player that can equalize the numbers, you got an unblocked guy, now the quarterback takes him away. That's going to continue to be an issue, and I think more teams now have a blueprint. The hard part about playing Ohio State in a single high safety defense is they're going to throw it over your head.
Right.
Where I think Iowa felt like they could get away with that is you're running out of space on the amount of short fields Ohio State was in. They played 60% of their snaps in Iowa territory. So there's only so much space for those guys to actually get open, and it worked to their favor playing on short fields. All of this to say, it's a numbers problem, and until the quarterback can make a decision about running the football, when teams decide that they are going to load the box on Ohio State, you either got to take the top off or you're just not running it.
Well, and we saw Michigan, so let's use them as the tent pole and the measuring stick. Michigan could run the ball on Iowa. Michigan has that balanced offense, right? And we saw that be
And
effective.
Illinois ran it on Iowa, too.
Illinois really ran it on Iowa, too. And so I think that's where when you're looking for, nitpicking, whatever we want to call it.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's what you look for. And so I think also, it was just good to learn something about C.J. Stroud pressured. He was under pressure so much more in this game. I mean, that was also clearly part of what Iowa was trying to do, was just have a hand in his face every single time.
Yes, because C.J. Stroud is much like most quarterbacks in college football, clean pocket, when there starts to get that cloudiness in there, he doesn't necessarily step into the throws the way that he typically would when the pocket's clean. So I would continue to pressure C.J. Stroud. All this to say, it was an unsharp performance. I think it was a kind of nasty offensive performance for Ohio State. And you walk out of there with 5 offensive touchdowns, and now we're asking all the questions. What's going on? I think that's a good place to be as a program because you'd rather coach off of that nasty tape in a win by 44 points or whatever the case was than being on the losing side of that one.
And the defense was great. And I know it's Iowa's offense. It's the worst offense in the country.
Yeah.
But you have to be excited about like Zach Harrison, right? And what you saw about how he was controlling the game in the trenches. And there were just so many positives there. So I don't want to overreact to the defense. But I think you can say that it is playing well.
So here's the six times, and Iowa would only turn it over 6 times all year, right? For all of the inadequacies of Iowa's offense, and there are many of them, they hadn't been all that turnover prone.
And this wasn't a take the football away defense for Ohio State necessarily either.
No.
Right.
And so that's kind of where it's unique. Like, was it an aberration for either team? That's the thing that I'm waiting to find out, too.
Okay, so I don't want to leave this without at least addressing Iowa, right? Obviously, defensively, they were not able to hold up. They held up for a while. The offense remains, I mean, I just don't know what to say at this point. They've scored 7 offensive touchdowns in 7 games. They do get Northwestern's defense this week. A coordinator
that is a must-see game.
A coordinator that is facing similar questions as Iowa is on the offensive side. I don't know. I mean, is there? You kind of felt like coming out of the bye, maybe they come up with something, and then we saw Padilla in the first snap. He fumbles the snap.
Yeah, and then the interception. I mean, it was the same problem.
It's the same thing.
It's the offense. It's not the quarterback.
It's not the players.
But yeah, 3rd time in 7 games under 160 total yards of offense. That is so hard to do in college football today.
It is.
That is so hard to do in college football today. It's a problem. And we all know the reasons that, there may not be a change there. Maybe a change at quarterback, and maybe you think. But that fan base is so upset. They're so frustrated watching the same mistakes each week.
Yeah, it's tough for me to watch, too, because where my mind went in this game is if Iowa has an offense that's like even ranked 60th in the country, the amount of field goals that Ohio State kicked early on, does that not change the game plan for Ohio State? They might play that game differently, knowing that there's a dangerous offense on the other side. And that's where it becomes really frustrating. That defense does everything it can every single week to give that team a chance to win. And offensively, there are just too many issues.
They even score points for them, and that's all they could possibly do. And also, like, you could have a great defense against a great offense, and there was so much they were being asked of. You can bend and bend and bend, but at some point the dam is going to break.
Ohio State got too many shots at it, and that's where it becomes an issue, is when you go up against a team like Ohio State, where at some point those wide receivers are going to take the top off of it. It's
like they played well. The defense played well
for
in this game, and they still lost 54-10.
Exactly. Right? Like, you give up the most points you've ever given up under Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah.
You have the second most lopsided loss under Kirk Ferentz. The first one was against Nick Saban in Michigan State in 1999.
But if you have an offense that is just right,
it was like
middle
8
of the pack.
drives for Ohio State before they legitimately started coming on.
Right, there were opportunities.
The first 4 drives they took over in Iowa territory, they ended up with a field goal. You do that against as dynamic an offense as we've seen. Your defense doing a lot of things well. I do want to talk about Purdue and Wisconsin. What do we make of? Let's start with the Boilers. I actually kind of think in a weird sort of way they're the bigger story, even though they lost this game just because they were in control of their own destiny in the West. And they're, well, I suppose maybe they kind of are, right? Still, if they win out and beat Illinois, they still are. Yeah,
maybe.
But it just feels like a missed opportunity.
It doesn't feel like that. Yeah, it felt like that was supposed to be the statement game where going and beating Wisconsin for the first time since 2003 was going to be the point where you're announcing, right, that you are one of the co-favorites in the West. Wasn't that? Wisconsin also jumped on them so early, and Graham Mertz played well. That's the formula for Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's where I was going to take it. Like, anytime you let a team jump out to a 21-0 lead, it's going to be hard to win football games. Purdue, from that point on, they outscored Wisconsin 24-14 or whatever the case was. You cannot give that up so early. But it's the same thing that we talk about, it feels like, every Saturday when we start diving into Purdue. this is a team that is wildly inconsistent. And I wish it wasn't like that, because they have at their top end a really competitive football team that you can make a case for a couple of plays in their first game and a couple of plays here and there in other games. Like, are they undefeated? Are they a one-loss team?
Right.
Are we talking about this team in the top 15 of college football right now? That is the frustrating part about watching Purdue.
And Aiden O'Connell, when he's not throwing interceptions, is maybe the second best quarterback in the league.
Yeah.
Tied his career high with 3 interceptions, and it's happened 3 times, twice against Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So let's tip our hats to the Badgers, because
Defense
it does
looks way better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does feel like, look, I obviously lost to Michigan State and didn't look good at all. But 2 of the 3 games under Jim Leonard, they played a lot better.
Yeah, they played a lot better from the start. I think that was pretty noticeable. And I think, too, you mentioned the defense. That's Jim Leonard's side of the ball. And obviously he's got to be more involved in all facets and phases of the game now. But I think there's a pride in Wisconsin being able to play like that defensively, to force turnovers, a pick six, a lot of things like that. And then again, Graham Mertz. When Graham Mertz is good and not making mistakes, it opens up possibilities to win games for Wisconsin.
It was funny because we're sitting in the green room watching it on Saturday. I'm like, oh, Graham Brady's going to work today. Like, he was playing some good football. I'm totally with you. When he's on point, that offense is so much more efficient. The Jim Leonard part that you brought up, we had talked about Saturday morning. You know, now you got some issues on the offense. You got a defensive coordinator who's the interim. He's got to go over there, but his defense isn't doing so well. How does he manage that? And to come out early on, pick 6 in the game, hot start. He deserves a ton of credit, because he is in a position, his coaching career, that he has not been in before. Typically for a head coach who's, you know, they've got experience on one side of the ball or the other, when it starts going wrong, it's not the first time, so they know how to handle it and they can put the pieces together. This dude's literally learning on the fly, like in season. I think there's
and
a
it's
lot
an
to be said
audition.
about that.
I mean, there's a lot of pressure that he's under right now.
Yep.
One other point: when Graham Mertz playing well, it opens things up for Braylon Allen. He had that nice run, break open the game.
Right.
I mean, it looks so much easier for Wisconsin.
Mertz against unranked teams in his career, 15-4 as a starter, 31 touchdown passes, 10 interceptions.
Wow.
Yeah.
That says it.
No doubt.
So much, man, and I'm gonna just tell you, it's the first time we've been bowl eligible this early since 2001. Fellas, you have earned the right. You have earned the right. Let's sing this damn song, man. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Our many scenes better than that one. The Maryland Terrapins rallied from a 10-point deficit, scored 24 of the game's final 31 points to top Northwestern 31-24, and Mike Loxley's team is indeed going bowling. Good win. Northwestern's not very good, but still, to win the game, to rally from behind, to do it with a backup quarterback, tells us a lot about Maryland.
It does, and that is a well-earned celebration. Getting bowl eligible, especially in the East, as I always say this about Maryland, Rutgers, and Indiana, like it's an uphill climb. I think they've really found something in the run game. They like Talia's not going to be gone for the year. They're going to get him back at some point. There's still a lot to like with Maryland, but just again, I think it's great that they're pausing and celebrating this moment.
Yeah, I mean that was a game where they could have made a decision to kind of give up, and it's like, hey, this is an ugly one,
sure.
and we don't have our starting quarterback. Like, defense is out of sync. It's one of those where you just kind of let it go, and they're like, no, we're going to come back. We're going to win this football game. We're going to do it with a lot of toughness, a lot of grit. We're going to give it to a young running back who's going to make a fantastic 75-yard play that really just kind of salts the game away. Like, we are going to do things that good teams tend to do. Maryland still had their mistakes, the Terps versus Terps thing that they got to continue to try to work through. But ultimately, I look at this one, and it's a program-type win.
Yep.
And you just mentioned being in the East, and it's a tough spot for these teams. I totally agree. To be bowl eligible this early is something that they should celebrate. And it makes you ask the question, if divisions weren't here, what our expectations would be of that program. Because in my mind, the expectation's starting to change. Great coaches, great players, and now they're going out there and starting to get the wins they need to get.
And they get a bye week this week to try to get Leah healthy. So I think that's pretty important for them,
Yep.
too. The timing is really good to have a game against a team that you can beat with a backup quarterback and then get the bye week. Northwestern, same old story now. 12 losses in 13 games, their worst stretch in 32 years. Last 6 drives, they got 1 stop. It was a missed field goal for Maryland. So
Out
for
of
all
character.
intents and purposes.
We're so used to seeing good Northwestern defenses.
Yeah, not the last 2 years.
No.
Not since Mike Hankwitz retired.
Yep.
How about Rutgers? First conference home win in more than 1,800 days. They rallied to top Indiana. They were down 14-0. And now here they are, 4 wins for Rutgers and finally getting that monkey off their back.
Another thing to celebrate in the East. I mean, this is not easy to do, and I think, too, with the way that they came back in this game, Connor Bazelak was perfect in the first quarter, and this is actually a really good rushing defense. This is one of the top 10 in the country, rushing defense and on third down. Like, there are, again, there's a lot of offensive struggles. Maybe they make it look hard, quarterbacks, et cetera, but really nice win, and coming from behind, led by that defense after a tough start.
Defense is a story for me. You mentioned the come from behind. From the second quarter on for Rutgers, defensively, it was lights out. There was not an inch on that field for Indiana to take. And I think that is a combination of how good I believe this Rutgers defensive unit to be and the struggles that exist for this Indiana offense. But you have to put it together. You can't just go out there and depend on the stats and the rankings. Like, you have to play the football game. And early on, Rutgers wasn't doing that on defense. But to get the score defensively is the one that seals it for me. Anytime you can score on defense, you know you're having a good day, and we're sitting there, and I'm like, Rever, it's going to come. They're going to get the pick 6, and they got the pick 6.
Yeah, you did. You called it. You called the pick 6.
I had a feeling that Rutgers was going to get over the hump.
Someone boldly predicted they'd win by double figures.
you were
At that
close.
point, they went up by double
Yes,
figures.
they did.
And someone may
That's
have been.
close.
That was a
close.
bold prediction
Yeah,
there.
it was.
But
It was.
all of that to say that we talk about program building wins. Maryland had theirs. This was a good one for Rutgers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What do we make of the Hoosiers? It just kind of feels like same old story for them as well. The second half fade is unfortunately becoming kind of part of their repertoire and not a part they want to have.
I mean, do you think this team's going to get bowl eligible? I don't see it.
No.
I don't see it. That's a problem. And again, we talked, both of those teams made changes on their coaching staff offensively to try to figure some things out. Still not really working.
Yeah, and I think the offensive game plan at this point needs to evolve. I don't think that you can keep running up
A million plays.
Yes, spread them out. Like, there comes a point where you have to have more of a conventional type of offense. And then I mentioned this last week, Rever, but one of the things that I've seen done before when you're a team that notoriously struggles in the second half is you make your second half game plan before the game even starts. And you can add in adjustments that you make in the locker room, but you already have a different plan coming out in the second half. Just so you don't have to think about it, and it's already set. And then you go with that, and then you start to sprinkle in the other adjustments. Maybe that's something that they can do. I don't know if they're doing that currently, but I've seen that happen. I've seen it work for teams.
13 losses in the last 14 conference games now for IU, and have to figure out a way to run the football. It's really an issue. Of 117 rushing yards in the last 3 games. And again, they try to address it with the staff changes, but it's hard mid-season. Our big stat brought to you by Gatorade. How about the Michigan State women's soccer team? We told you about them last week. They are the outright Big Ten regular season champ. It is the first recognized title in program history. Just the 9th ever undefeated Big Ten champ. They've now beaten 5 nationally ranked teams after topping Rutgers yesterday. That is a program record. They open the Big Ten tourney 6 days from now against Minnesota here on the Big Ten Network. The coach of that team is Jeff Hosler. He joins us now. He is today's big interview. And Coach, congratulations. Thanks for joining us. You are from East Lansing, so we're going to get into your background in just a bit. But what does it mean to you, not just to win a title, but to win it at your hometown school, the school that you grew up rooting for, and to do it in as convincing fashion as you guys have?
Yeah, Dave, thanks for having me on. It kind of feels like I'm living in a dream. To grow up here, coach here, this is an incredible group of players. With the turnaround we had, the belief they gave us, the trust they gave our coaching staff, the way they've bought in. I mean, it's pretty surreal. Just coming to work here every day, just so honored, so blessed to be leading this program.
So you took over a program that had won 1 game the year before you took over. Not one conference game, not one game, period. Although I guess they were all conference, right? Because that was a COVID season. But anyway, the point remains they weren't very good. And 16 months later, you end up winning a Big Ten championship. And just to put it in perspective, this is a program that, as you know, not only had they not won the Big Ten, they hadn't made it to the Big Ten tournament in a decade. So how do you explain that turnaround to go from that 16 months later to going undefeated and running through the league?
Well, one of the things that allowed us to be successful early on is, Tom Saxton, Tammy, Stacy, the previous coaching staff. One of the pillars they really established here was family. There was a lot of love, a lot of support, a lot of trust amongst the group, and that allowed us to come in to a really strong environment that way. Obviously, we have a different style of play. This group of players, I found them to be incredibly hungry, incredibly humble, willing to work each time out. To be where we are after, the first year to go to 10 wins, to finish fourth, to host a Big Ten tournament. Last year we checked so many different boxes with first time in a decade, types of things, that to come in this year and then do it all over again. Each time we win a game, my SID is like, hey, it's the first time we've beat Illinois in 12 years, or here's the last time we beat somebody else in 10 years. And, you kind of pinch yourself like, wow, this is really happening, So, but to do it and then to go undefeated in conference play with this conference as elite as it is, the players, the coaches, the teams, the tradition, the national recognition it receives is just incredible. And I told this to our kids yesterday. We won five top 20 wins this year, but each time we've had a massive win, they've come back looking for more, even more engaged, more focused, and find a way to go back out and get the result again. So it's been pretty remarkable.
At what point did you realize this team could be pretty good?
Well, I knew coming into the year, and we have a lot of experience, from players that were holdovers from the previous staff. We've also brought in 9 different transfers. We had 10 freshmen. Actually, our roster this year has more new faces than it did returners from a fall ago. So we had to blend a lot of different pieces together, but I think some of that, it really made us special when you bring a lot of different individuals, personalities, and experiences together. But we were very intentional in the recruiting process, where we asked hard questions. We knew they were committed. They worked really hard. They wanted to grow and be challenged every day. And I think that's really always been the centerpiece for us. I think for us, turning point wise, honestly, the loss at Arkansas, our lone loss, going on the road, SEC, back-to-back champions. We played really, really well. I thought we were unfortunate to come away with a 1-0 loss that day. Really kind of set the tone for our team to see what we could do and really start to believe what we were capable of after winning that Colorado game a week later.
You mentioned the portal, and you brought in, as you said, 8 new players in the portal. What's that process like? We kind of talk about it broadly. This guy went in the portal, or this gal went in the portal, they came out of the portal, whatever. But what's it like to monitor the portal as a coach and to kind of sift through it and find the players who are the right fit for you?
Yeah, the portal, it comes to the good and the bad. And obviously players go in because they're looking for new opportunity or, working through adversity. I think, again, in recruiting, you have to be intentional. But for us, we were very strategic. I have a great coaching staff. Megan Link and Gabe Romo were absolutely critical in our recruitment of transfers. We literally had a schedule set up, so every 15 minutes we were clicking refresh. I think it's important to get in there early. And I'm talking about all hours of the day. So,
goodness. No one's waking up at 3 a.m. to click refresh on the portal, are they?
We weren't going that wild.
Okay.
I think sleep's still important for the coaching staff,
too. Yeah, so that makes
but
me feel better. Okay. That's crazy.
Yeah. I will tell you, though, if we have the opportunity, we are definitely checking it. And we want to be first in on kids. So if we couldn't email them, we were definitely checking into their DMs.
Okay, so you grew up in East Lansing. You went to East Lansing High School. You grew up going to Michigan State games. So who was your favorite Spartan growing up?
That's a tough one. Yeah, we had season tickets here at Jenison. So probably Steve Smith. We still had season tickets as we transitioned to Breslin Center. Talk about tall, maybe 6'7", 6'8", silky smooth point guard. Get to the rim, distribute. Had a flair. I think he channeled his inner Magic Johnson at times. So, he was one of my favorites. I love the Fire and Ice days, the Sean Respert, Eric Snow. Those years were really a lot of fun to watch. Those were incredible teams. You know, Respert, I think one of the best shooters all time in the Big Ten. So, yeah, I paid a little bit of attention to it.
I would say so. Smitty's one of the all-time great guys, as I'm sure you know, worked for us for quite a while here at the Big Ten Network. Is there a game, is there a memory of watching Michigan State that kind of sticks with you, that's kind of, this is my pinnacle of my Spartan fandom?
I think that first year when they moved into Breslin, they won the Big Ten. Sticking around for the whole celebration, the ceremony afterwards was really, really cool to experience, to be there and see that firsthand.
So you were a basketball player in high school as well as a soccer player, and it's obvious you followed Michigan State basketball really closely. Give us a sense for your game and kind of your recruitment in each one of those sports.
Yeah, I was a decent high school player. I was fortunate. Both teams that I played on had a lot of talent. We were, always ranked in the top 10 in the state for both sports. Our point guard was a guy by the name of Thomas Jackson that actually kind of started the whole buzz of Butler basketball in the early 2000s. So I got a chance to play at Breslin Center one time. We played against Waverly with Marcus Taylor, who was a Michigan State point guard in the future. We had over 10,000 fans here for a regular season game.
Wow.
So some pretty big time environments. I was pretty good, but I was a shooter. I loved to get up and down the floor, being having the fitness level of a soccer player, but never good enough to play either sport here at Michigan State. So just looking to prove I'm good enough to coach it.
So, well, I think you've proven that. So you went to Alma College, Division III. You played both sports, but you were part of really good soccer teams. You were 4-time all-conference player there. What made you decide to go into coaching?
Honestly, a lot of the coaches I had along the way, going through high school. Chris Ferguson was an incredible basketball coach for me. Nick Archer, I think, is the all-time winningest coach in the state of Michigan for high school soccer. Carlton Valentine, his sons played basketball here, was a major impact in my life. And then in my college days, I played for Scott Fry. We went to a Final Four my sophomore year, and Scott went on to win, I think it's 6 national championships at D3 Messiah College. So been very, very blessed, very fortunate to have a lot of mentors in my life, and I'm leaving some off just because of how instrumental they've all been.
Well, I know your dad was one of them, right? He was a coach on the side in addition to being an attorney. What did you learn from him?
So much. I strive every day to be the man that my father was to us as a family growing up. He literally worked as an attorney all day. He came home, he coached all 4 of us kids in all of our different sports, super involved in our lives, oftentimes tucking us in, going back to work. He just worked around the clock to support our family. And from a coaching standpoint, the kindness he coached with, while also having expectations of their players. So one of the most touching things ever was his funeral. We actually had to have two different funerals for all the people that wanted to come. Wow. And show support because of the way he impacted this community.
Wow. I know you got 3 kids of your own. You got 2 girls who really look up to your team. As you pass on that legacy that your dad passed on to you, what does it mean for them to have female role models like your players?
We are so blessed to have that. We talk about family being one of our cultural pillars. We try to demonstrate that as a coaching staff. My kids, at least once a week, one of my kids will be in and around the training session. In fact, I was able to take my middle child, Kennedy, with us on our Northwestern trip. She may have also been on the sideline to see Coach get a yellow card, so I got reprimanded by my wife. But they see all of it. They see the reality of it all, and this group has been so great embracing our family, being older sisters to our kids. We like to have them over at our house. And our dog, our Nutmeg, our dog also appreciates it because he gets a lot of love on those days.
Hey, real quick, you host Minnesota to start the Big Ten tournament coming up here next week on the Big Ten Network. Obviously, the NCAA tournament is going to be in your future. What do you tell your team about the build now here going forward?
Yeah, you close the chapter on the regular season. Postseason play is a totally different animal. Obviously, we bring overtime play back into the rules now. I think a lot of times people talk about the stakes being higher or different. For us, it's the same. Every day is a competitive opportunity to be our best. That's the way we're going to set out in training this week. Minnesota's playing great soccer. You know, they're unbeaten their last 5. We're excited to have an opportunity to play someone that we did not have in our unbalanced Big Ten schedule this year. So it's a day-to-day process. Obviously, both of those things are in the future for us, which we're excited about. But I think that also gives us some stability to just focus on the day at hand.
Well, Jeff, ton of fun. It feels like the best is yet to come for you guys, but remarkable story. Congratulations on all your success, and thanks for giving us some of your time.
Of course. Thanks so much for having us on. Go Green.
This is the final week of byes in the Big Ten. Everyone plays every weekend in November. As for the 4 teams that did not play this past weekend, 2 are in the championship hunt, Michigan in the East, Illinois in the West. Michigan State and Nebraska, of course, also sat it out on Saturday. Interestingly, these 4 teams square off against one another this week. Let's start. It's a crazy coincidence, huh, Joshua? It blows your mind. Yeah. Let's start with the 2 in the East. Michigan is the team that's in the hunt, obviously, undefeated. What interests you the most about the Wolverines coming off the bye?
Well, I mean, I just think you're trying to figure out what else can they add to this team. What else can they add offensively? We've seen them work on different wrinkles, get J.J. McCarthy comfortable. We've seen games where they've relied on the run game. We've seen games where they've stretched it. I think we all want to see J.J. run it himself a little bit more, but so sort of what does all of that look like? And then obviously any nicks and bruises, you get a little healthy.
Yeah, I think it's the quarterback run game, the wrinkles that you can add there. I love that. And we had talked about J.J. McCarthy and his ability to run the football, but also getting him comfortable throwing the football down the field against tight coverage, I think should have been a point of emphasis for this Michigan offense, because J.J. McCarthy has been great throwing the football, but when you get those deep shots that you have to connect on, you want your young quarterback to feel very confident in it.
And you're not going to be able to run for 400 yards every game.
You can't do it.
Yes,
you can try.
You can always try.
You can try. It seems like the way to beat Michigan State, though, is the pass, but still, Spartans has some momentum, right? I mean, they had the bye week after the win over Wisconsin. This team has to feel a little bit better about itself, particularly given the really good recent history here against Michigan.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And, you know, Mel Tucker is 2-0 in this series. And I think that's an interesting point as we go into this. But then also what Dave was just talking about what they were coming off of. Peyton Thorne looked good last time we saw him out. The defense is still able to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks. But they're going to have to do that to avoid some issues on the back end against Michigan.
Yeah, and they got a couple of guys healthier for that Wisconsin game. I think that made a difference in making sure that those guys are maintaining so they can stay on the football field will be big. All the questions to me, though, are still about this defense and can they hold up in the pass game? Because it seems like the game plan for a lot of teams has just been let's drop back and see how many times we can get an opportunity to go up against this secondary. Have they found anything schematically that's going to help them take relief and pressure off of the corners and the safeties? I don't know if they can, though.
Xavier Henderson does help,
yes.
to your point. Yeah. Jacob Slade back on that defense as well.
A couple of great Central
Ohio guys. I almost didn't bring up Xavier Henderson.
Well, and Jacob Slade actually went to Olentangy High School. It's my high school.
Because I knew we'd get Central Ohio guys.
You laid it right up.
How about this? Michigan 33-3 against unranked teams at home under Jim Harbaugh. 2 of the 3 losses to Michigan State. So we shall see.
The one rival that they haven't quite cracked the same way.
Illinois, man, this has been a great story this year. They get the bye week. Honestly, if I were them, I would have just wanted to keep on playing. I mean, it does seem like they have a ton of momentum. They did get Tommy DeVito back healthy last time out. But what do we make of the Illini as they head into this stretch run, firmly in control of their own destiny?
Yeah, it was a good bye week for them because they are now kind of the team in the West because of what we saw with Purdue. So it's just continuing to do what you do. And you look at this schedule, obviously that Purdue game, I think you're still going to circle it. You've got the game at Michigan, but you can lose to Michigan and win the West and get to Indianapolis. Yes. And so that's where you look at this and you just take care of business against the teams that you are better than. Just ride that defense, that run game. Tommy DeVito was great last time out, but look at that schedule. That's a team that's getting to Indianapolis.
I totally agree with you. I think this bye week might have been an opportunity to show maybe a low light reel for this team so they don't get too confident and too ahead of themselves. And I'm not exactly sure that they would, but just the things that they can work on, the small things, because it's not a lot of big issues for this team. Illinois, though, I think the biggest thing that I do question is the running back room, and can Chase Brown sustain the amount of volume that he's been given up to this point? The bye week was great for him to get a break, but there also needs to be a great relief back that they can start working back into that rotation.
Right, and they've had an injury at
Yes.
that position, which has hurt them some with McCray this year. So whether or not they can work him back into the lineup. But absolutely, I mean, that is the one thing where, man, he has a huge volume of carries. But this team, I mean, it's been quite a story. They have a chance to get to 7-1 for the first time since 2001. To do that, they would have to beat Nebraska. It does feel like the Huskers are in a little bit better spot than they were in. Obviously, the loss to Purdue has to sting, particularly with how well they threw the ball, but still 2 wins in their last 3 games and starting to figure it out, certainly on offense.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true, and I think we saw even glimpses of that early in the season, what was possible with this quarterback. But, I think in general, it does feel like this is one of those situations. We've talked a lot about interim coaches and just sort of like a feel and maybe even a way you play harder. And you're not giving up on games. If you look at the way that they lost some of those games early, especially I think of like the Oklahoma game where it just pulls away, the game is over. They fought against Rutgers, they fought against Purdue. This is a team that's not an easy out anymore, and I think you can credit a lot of that to Mickey Joseph.
I'm totally with you. I think defensively for Nebraska now, can you add some more wrinkles? Because they really simplified it to try to play coverage and let their guys go out there and make plays. So what do the wrinkles look like? And then in terms of offensive scheme, the isolation plays that they could draw up for Palmer, because that guy can run. So I just give him a chance and then lob that thing up to him and see if he can't take it the rest of the way himself.
It is crazy to me they averaged more than 9 yards per play against Purdue and still lost the game.
It's nuts.
Purdue has played some wild games.
That
I feel like that's how I chalk
And
that up.
there were some gash plays that skewed that number a little bit, but it is still crazy. You give up more than 600 yards, though, it's hard to win, no matter how many yards you average per play on offense.